Hello and welcome to part 2 of this impromptu tutorial video over planning an argumentative essay using Toulmin model sentences. I kind of just started this video series to help students out with your next argumentative essay and the mandatory planning assignment that goes with that, using those Toulmin sentences to plan out the logic of your essay. In the last video, I kind of just went over how to create those Toulmin model sentences, and I talked briefly about what the purpose of those sentences was. Remember, you're going to be writing for every supporting claim that you make in support of your your simple thesis. Remember, we haven't, in my example anyway, we haven't actually written our sophisticated final thesis yet, but for every supporting claim in support of your simple thesis here, you're going to write two separate Toulmin model sentences. One, this sentence that identifies the angle of examination. That's just what I call it. It's just basically a Toulmin model sentence that tests the logic of how well your supporting claim actually supports your thesis statement, which is something a lot of students overlook. A lot of students think that when they get to this step and they've got their 4 points, they think, wow, that looks really good, and they just start writing, and then they get all the way through a paragraph, and then they realize, wait, this supporting claim, I'm a little off topic here, this supporting claim doesn't exactly support my thesis, and so either they have to scratch out the whole paragraph and they've just wasted 10 minutes, or they leave it in there hoping for the best, when the graders will see right through that and they'll just mark you down to a 4 or even worse because you've used inappropriate evidence and explanations. You've gone off or you aren't arguing directly to what you say you're arguing. So that is the nature of this, or that is the purpose of this first Toulmin model sentence. The second Toulmin model sentence is designed just to help you develop your argument. And we're going to look at both of these a little more in depth, at what each of these model sentences can do and how they can really help us. So let's take a look at some of my other supporting claims here, and let's write another Toulmin model sentence. I'm going to write define my angle here with the Toulmin model sentence. Let's write this one out. All right, Toulmin sentence begins with because of my support, and remember my instructions for support. You're pulling your supporting claim for this one, because we're testing how well the supporting claim supports your thesis. So because mankind is driven to advance the human race, comma, therefore, and that's where we input our simple thesis, therefore, an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms for his or her safety, since, let's see, what is my underlying logic here? Because mankind is driven to advance the human race, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms, since surrendering freedom for greater safety will advance the human race. That's the logic that I'm operating on if I use this claim. Let's read my Toulmin model sentence. Because mankind is driven to advance the human race, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms for his or her safety, since surrendering freedom for greater safety will advance the human race. Well, that's the right assumption, all right. However, since this assumption is pointing at a much larger problem with this line of reasoning, this is invalid. Yeah, this is invalid. I can't use this supporting claim as it's written. Yeah, I can't use this because it's not technically valid. Does surrendering freedom in favor of safety, does that really advance the human race? Maybe, but I really couldn't argue that. There's not really any good examples out there right now that I could ever use. Consider any societies from the past that have sacrificed, whether willingly or unwillingly, where the people have sacrificed freedom for greater safety. Think of any totalitarian regime. Think of North Korea. Those people, of course, unwillingly have done so, but they have sacrificed all of their personal freedoms, virtually all of their freedoms, for the ultimate safety. And by safety, I mean protection from one another, not necessarily protection from their government, but that's neither here nor there. But we wouldn't really say that their society has advanced the human race. If anything, it's kind of taken a step back. So by forcing myself to write this initial Toulmin model sentence, I have identified that this is invalid. Yeah, this is invalid. I can't really use this in an essay. And the problem right away lies in the way I phrased my supporting claim. Yeah. Let me show you what we can do if we just kind of revise this claim, because I don't think I really meant with this claim that mankind is driven, that sacrificing personal freedoms drives the advancement of the human, or is driven by the desire to advance the human race. I think what I meant was this. Because mankind is driven to preserve its species. That's what I really meant by advancing the human race, but advancing the human race doesn't really work. A lot of people could argue that the human race is not advanced at all if everyone starts giving up personal freedoms. However, this is much more arguable. And to test it out, let's write another Toulmin model sentence. Because mankind is, I don't need to type that over again. You just copy and paste. Because mankind is driven to preserve its species, therefore, use the same claim, because I'm still testing it against my thesis statement. Since prioritizing safety over freedom will help preserve the species, or help preserve a species. This is true of any species, although it's kind of weird to think of animals sacrificing freedoms. But in general, this is true. If we just concerned ourselves with being safe and we forgot about all of all the freedoms that we could have, yes, that would really help ensure that it will help preserve our species for the future. Because we're not taking any risks. So here's my complete logic. Because mankind is driven to preserve its species, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms for his or her safety, since prioritizing safety over freedom will help preserve a species. Good. So I've just, my little Toulmin model test actually has helped me make a more valid claim. Okay, this one's valid and I can use this. Let's try it again on the next one. A lot of times when a student needs help crafting a Toulmin model sentence, it's because their Toulmin model is just confusing to them. And you know, they have an idea of how their evidence or their support relates to their claim, but either their warrant isn't coming to them naturally, or their warrant is just a repetition of their support, or something. So I want to take a look at another way in which forcing yourself to write these sentences can point out how maybe your initial support is a little confusing and needs to be reworked. So let's write a Toulmin sentence for this one. And I've actually already got one prepared. Just paste it in here. Yeah. There we go. Because being safe has more tangible value than being free, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms for his or her safety. Since people, when given the option between choosing something with tangible value and something with insubstantial value, generally choose the former. I've lost interest in my own line of reasoning here. This is terribly confusing. I really shouldn't use this. Yeah, I mean, I could push through this and maybe come up with something kind of cogent for an essay, but I'd rather not. Let me try rewording my claim into something that that will just work out a lot better. So this just isn't going to work. I'll highlight it. I'll highlight it red there, and italicize it just to point out that it is a bad line of reasoning. So we've established that this particular supporting claim is not really a viable option just because it's too confusing. So if it's too confusing, let's look at the supporting claim and try to reword it. Because being safe has more tangible value than being free, that's why an individual is willing to sacrifice. Well, what am I really saying there? What I'm really implying is that you know, saying that being safe has more tangible value, I'm implying that people want things that are tangible. So I'm basically saying that people generally are pragmatic, are pragmatic and not idealistic. There we go. that's what I'm basically saying when I say that being safe has more tangible value. That's why they would do this. I'm saying that they would do this because because tangible things appeal to them rather than idealistic things, those insubstantial things in life. Yeah, safety appeals to our practicality, our pragmatism. Safety is a very realistic, attainable goal, whereas freedom does not provide us with any immediate satisfaction. And push come to shove, I think I'm going to try and argue that if a person's safety was threatened, an individual would rather give up their ideals of freedom to hold on to the pragmatic or practical value of safety. And so let's go ahead and test my new supporting claim here, and I've actually got this one already typed up as well. And here it is. Because people generally are pragmatic and not idealistic, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms for his or her safety, since sacrificing freedom for safety is a demonstration of pragmatism, not idealism. That's perfectly sound. That is clear and valid. Okay, I would need to do some arguing, but that's what the next Toulmin model sentence is for. Okay. Let's take a look at this last one, the one that I did not do on the previous video. Because society is dependent on its citizens, being willing to sacrifice personal freedoms. Okay, so let's do a new one here. Because society is dependent on its citizens sacrificing personal freedoms, therefore, same therefore, it's the one I've used 4 times now because I'm testing, all 4 of my supporting claims against my one thesis. Okay. Since let's see, because society is dependent on its citizens sacrificing personal freedoms, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms for his or her safety. So I've got society is dependent on this, an individual is willing to do this. So those are the 2 terms I need to connect. Since most people prefer to live within society. There are very few people who do not prefer the communal bond of living within a group. Very few people indeed. Even those people who like to live alone, they still, at some point on some basic level, enjoy the fact that they are still part of a larger community within a nation. But anyway, those people are still in a small minority. Most people prefer to live in a society. They prefer the protection that society offers them, the comforts that society offers them, that sort of thing. So this is perfectly valid, yeah, because a society is dependent on its citizens. An individual is willing to sacrifice those freedoms because most people prefer to live within society. So that's a valid statement. Now I can move on to writing some more of these argument statements. I'll just kind of take you through some extra of those. You can watch this or not. This is just ways of practicing developing arguments. So here's what I came up with. Let's take a look at this first one again. Because mankind is driven to preserve its species, therefore an individual is often willing to sacrifice personal freedoms, since prioritizing safety over freedom will help preserve a species. Interesting, interesting. I can approach this a couple different ways. I can either, well, let's just write the argument. Oops. Because, remember, I don't know what my because is quite yet. I do know what my claim is. I'm pulling my claim from my support here, because now I'm trying to, provide support for my supporting claim. Because of what, therefore, mankind is driven to preserve its species. I want to make the very basic biological argument here. Because man is an organism, therefore, mankind is driven to preserve the species. Since all organisms are driven to preserve the species. Cool. That is the shape that my argument's going to take. Okay. I know that this particular supporting argument is valid and or is going to clearly support my thesis because I've already tested it in this Toulmin model sentence. And now I've developed a really good argument. I can build a whole body paragraph out of this line of reasoning using evidence to support probably this statement right here, my warrant. I would need to provide examples of why, of organisms that are driven to preserve the species. Or I could find, I could think of, if I was really good at biology and I remembered, perhaps some famous biologist who arrived at this principle, that sort of thing. So that's where my evidence would need to come from, either inductively through observation of various different types of organisms that preserve their species, but all of them are focused on doing that. Or I could provide some type of, keep going with a deductive syllogism or something like that, but I have options. What this Toulmin model sentence does is it shows me where I need to use evidence. I need to use it for this sentence, or for this statement right here. I need to prove my warrant. Okay? Let's move on to another one. Remember, the red ones are the ones we've thrown out already. Here we go. Because people are generally pragmatic. Left out a people in there. So that is my claim. Now let's build an argument out of this. All right, because, and I think I already have this one written down. And I do already have this one written down, pasted in there now. Because people, remember, I'm trying to prove this statement, that people are generally pragmatic and not idealistic. So my main argument, my main support is going to be that because people tend to make choices based on the tangible or practical benefits that choice offers, rather than based on upholding some ideal, therefore people generally are pragmatic and not idealistic, since making choices based on tangible practical benefits and abandoning the ideal that's what pragmatism is. Okay? So that's a sound argument. That's going to be a primarily deductive paragraph, I can tell already. I can provide all kinds of hypothetical scenarios, once again, I need to probably provide evidence to justify. This is just an assumption. I mean, this is an assumption everyone would agree with, because that's just the defining pragmatism. My support would need some proof. I would need to find examples of the ways in which people prefer to make choices based on tangible benefits rather than based on upholding ideals. Okay? Let's try my last one. I think I have this one already written out as well. It's, the society is dependent on its citizens sacrificing personal freedoms. Yeah, let me do the argument for this one. There we go. Paste that in. So society is dependent on its citizens. Why? Well, it's because a society can only prosper when it limits the personal freedoms of its citizens in some way. Therefore, society is dependent on its citizens sacrificing personal freedoms, since the continued existence of a society depends on its prosperity. See how I've connected my support and my logic, my support talking about the only way in which society can prosper. The second one talking about how society is dependent on the way that I said it can only prosper, and so my warrant is this is the only way society can continue to exist is if it prospers. Societies that do not prosper, they no longer exist. They eventually cease to be, and so that's another sound argument there. Probably the main thing that I would need to argue, my warrant's pretty universal. I might have to argue that, but really, if I left that just as it is in my paper, if I explicitly stated my warrant, readers would just accept that. This is what I would need to prove. Yeah, that a society can only prosper when it limits the personal freedoms of its citizens in some way. And that would not be very hard to prove. I just need to throw in some examples of, of little things that we don't even notice are actually freedoms taken away. Our society could not prosper if theft and murder were not against the law. And not allowing citizens to murder one another, that's technically taking away some of their freedoms. And it's done obviously for the greater good, because no one wants to get murdered. So there you have it. Cool. So here is my, my completed reasoning. Okay, now all I would need to do is, since I've already done all this on scratch paper, is just copy and paste all of my Toulmin model sentences, or in your case, handwrite them down in the appropriate boxes. Yeah. Oops. really matter what order I paste them in, and I'm not going to sit here and film myself pasting all these in for you. I can leave that to your imagination. But that right there is how you use the Toulmin model sentence to test for the logic of your supporting claims and to develop your arguments and give you direction on where you need to pull evidence from. I hope this has helped you out. Really, the last step that remains is taking all of the planning you've done, all of these ideas, my supporting claims, because mankind is driven to preserve its species, because people are generally pragmatic, because society is dependent on personal freedoms being sacrificed, because it is human nature to do this. Those four things will help me take my simple thesis and derive a final, focused, precise, closed thesis statement that would be more appropriate for an essay. Once again, I hope this video has helped you out just a little bit. Help you a little bit more in planning your argumentative essay using those Toulmin model sentences. Good luck on your essay writing. And if you have any questions, of course, as always, please come see me in tutorials.